Whenever you are trying to complete a larger project, which usually takes a lot more time, when you are at the same time doing school or work, how do you balance the time between your project and the other necessary things which you have to do?
That is a really good question. I think that's a really important question too, because creative people don't generally, sometimes it happens, but creative people don't generally just, become creative late in life. We start early, you know what I mean? We're sort of brought up that way, and we learn creative things, and that can conflict with things like school, that can conflict with job, that can conflict with a social life even. A lot of famous painters throughout history were kind of, reclusive.
Yeah.
They were kind of hermits and stuff, so because they wanted that time and because people didn't tend to understand them. I think now, as time has gone on, artists are more not looked at as an unusual breed, but more respected. And so consequently, as it's more respected, more people are getting into it, so there can be community rather than necessarily reclusiveness in being an artist. And I think that's one thing that helps you find the time is if you find time with other people who are into art and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I find for me is when it comes to time management, essentially, we have a lot more time than we think we have. And when we actually look at one thing that I did back when I was in college, because when I was in college, I had a lot less time all of a sudden, I was homeschooled before I went to college, and I could, time was a lot more flexible, as a homeschooler than it was being in college. So what I did was I made a list of my classes and my other responsibilities outside of school, homework and that sort of thing, as well as any other kind of work or chores, or, I even thought of, how much is a reasonable amount of family time, for example, and I made a list and a schedule. And at first I tried to make a rigid schedule and stick to that, and that just didn't work because life doesn't look at your calendar and agree to go by it,
Yeah.
But what I did later is try and use it as a guideline. I tried to look at, I actually have an hour here, or someday I might look at, I have 10 minutes in the morning if I get up early. I can spend that on my art if I get up a little earlier, so that kind of thing. So I kind of look at it. I once wrote a blog post on my blog called You're Not Busy, is what it was called. And the basic idea of it was we're never really too busy for the things we want to do. I think sometimes it comes down to how badly do we want it, and that's when we'll start to make time, actually carve out time instead of just waiting for time to come up. Again, kind of like the emotional approach with the motivation, not letting our feelings dictate it, not letting necessarily circumstances dictate when we're going to work on stuff. Instead of just waiting for time or waiting to be in the mood, just make yourself, get yourself in the mood, carve out some time. Sometimes that means you'll have to miss out on other things. You'll have to cancel things or whatever. Other times it means you won't be able to do much art. You have to balance it with the reasonability within your life, and other people in your life and everything.
Yeah.
And how do I personally, I guess at this point, kind of find time as well? I'm out of school now, but I'm working. I am working 5 days a week, but one day is on freelance audio. One day, the other 4 days are my day job at the newspaper that I work for. So where do I find time to work on my stuff? Generally in the evenings or the mornings or the weekends. But of course, there's usually the chores that you couldn't do during the week that you have to do on the weekends. But yeah, I try and plan ahead. I know I have this, an hour or two this Saturday, so I am going to plan ahead that this is exactly what I'm going to work on. So yeah, I'd say really just look at your schedule and look for any pockets. If it's 10 minutes, if it's 5 minutes even, go for that pocket, because the more you practice your craft, the more you can do in, say, 5 or 10 minutes. I can't edit a whole half-hour radio drama in 5 minutes, but I can really start working on, cutting up some dialogue in one scene maybe, and I might not get it done, but I'll get further forward. I think that was the struggle I used to have. I always tried to find time where I could finish an entire project at once, instead of just, do I have 5 minutes? I can get further forward in 5 minutes. So just really play with those increments.
Yeah.